Welcome to the Transformational podcast. We are so glad you're joining us. And wherever you are, whether you're in your car, you're on your run, maybe you're in the gym, or maybe you're like me, you're just doing chores around the house. We're glad you're with us. You got myself, the Marine from Maryland, Robert. You got Chris, the pastor from Paradise. And we're happy to be back. And it was funny. We started talking about what we might talk about before we get started, because we do at least try to narrow it down.
Yeah, know where we're going a little bit. Yeah.
And we both realized that we were having the podcast before the podcast, and Chris was the one who this time says, all right, let's stop. Let's record. So here we are. But Chris, I haven't actually chatted with you in at least a week. What's going on in your world? How's things going?
You know, we've had a good week. We wrapped up baseball, high school baseball for the year, and just, normal week. I actually made a trip over to mom and dad's, got to see the finished house, so I was excited to see that.
Was that pretty cool?
It was awesome, man. I'm excited for it, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited to get to see. It's just a reminder of God's faithfulness to his people. Like, God is, it's just.
How long has it been?
Dad likes to say it was a 50-year dream because they've been married 50 years. But I'm excited for them that they could do that. And so I went over there to do some stuff to help them out.
Did you lift heavy things, Chris?
I
did. Put all those working outs to work?
I did. And what's funny is I had, one of our friends who listens to the podcast, he was like, you need to give your brother a hard time. Ask him what he's been doing for your parents lately. I was like, oh, that's messed up. But
I love it. No, that's fair. It's tough but fair, as I like to say in my business. Tough but fair. No, that's
anyway. So that was good. Good morning at church. So.
Yes, let's just tell your friend that I've been
you can tell him right now.
Hey, friend, I'm the firstborn. That's what I'm doing for my parents.
Oh, brother.
Man. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, so
we're recording on a Sunday. Which is a little unusual, but
our schedules just didn't align.
Yeah,
but it's all good. So actually, just finished church, and so we're recording right now. But what's been going on in your world?
Well, so this week, normal work stuff. But Chris, You moved heavy stuff for your parents. I moved heavy stuff for my driveway.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I have a gravel driveway, and it's got various forms of gravel on it. And one of the things that I'll patch the gravel with, because during the winter season, when it snows or whatever, it actually, for some reason, and I don't know, somebody probably knows
there's science behind it somewhere.
The science behind this, but it basically pulls up all of the soft spots in the driveway when it snows and freezes. And then when we drive over it, we just hollow them out. So I got like holes from one end to the other. It's not a short driveway, Chris. We're talking, I don't know, 400, 800, somewhere in there. It's a long driveway.
Yeah. No, this is not a driveway that's just for your house. It's like a private drive. Yeah.
For another one right before us. And so I tend to fill in the holes. Well, Chris, I filled in the holes this week, or actually on Friday, and it took 2.5 tons of RC6. 2.5 tons of RC6, Chris, is... Yesterday, I was sitting around and I was like, I don't know what side hurts more, my abs or my back. My abs or my back. It was hurting. And then Chris, Josh had a great soccer game yesterday. I've been waiting to tell you. He had a great soccer game. He normally plays like in the defense or goalie, but coach played him in midfield this week for some reason.
Nice.
And anyway, he kept crossing it, and people weren't one-touching it, and he was passing. He was doing a lot of really good things. Well, he finally put himself right where he should be, right in the middle, and as someone crossed it, he one-touched it straight in the goal. And it was beautiful. It was brilliant. It was the second goal of the game. He was super pumped, and of course, I'm super pumped because I'm a dad. And then he went into the second half as the goalie because he's been trying goalie. His words are... what did he say? He said, I'm comfortable in most positions, but I kind of want to try goalie because I haven't played that. So I was like, okay. So I gave him some just basics, out back.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. And like the make yourself big. Well, Chris, they had a breakaway. They're coming down the field. And I said, hey, I said, luck favors the aggressive at this age.
Yeah.
And I was like, just so you know. Well, no kidding. The breakaway, it was 2-1. He bolts from the goal. He literally goes beyond the box, which I'm like, Like, I'd like you to at least be able to use your hands. No.
He
No.
goes all the way outside the
Goes all the
box?
way out.
Okay.
Clears it. And I'm like, okay. Okay. And then on another one, they had the angle in the box. They shot, but he made himself big and kind of like a it's called like the triangle, you know?
Right.
And anyway, he got a great save. And
There you
so
go.
it was a lot of goals to 0. And he contributed to some saves in the second half. So it was fun. It was fun to watch him. He learns and that kind of thing. And then Chris, I've had a bunch of other conversations. We may talk about them as we go through the Bible study today. I tell you what, it's interesting how when you make yourself available to others and you make yourself available to the Lord, how he uses what you're reading this week to interact with the people that have questions that are, it's like directly applicable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like I was reading in Ruth this week, and it's a 2-day reading in my Bible. But you could read it in one day. It's only 4 chapters. And I got done reading it on Friday, and I'm going to start at the end and then we'll kind of back up. I got done reading it on Friday, and it kind of hit me that when you read Ruth, and we'll do it as a big kind of the overview, the umbrella on this one. When you read Ruth through 2 days, but it really wasn't 2 days.
Yeah.
It was many, many years. In fact, it was even when she got back to Judah, it doesn't really say how long, but it could have been up to 4 weeks, maybe even up to 2 months. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it hit me. I was like, that's kind of crazy. And then so you start to think about that, and then you look back at what Ruth is. And I'll give the synopsis, and then I got a question for you.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to give the synopsis.
Go for synopsis. Yes.
The synopsis is Naomi and Elimelech. I think that's how you say the name. They move to Moab. They moved to Moab because there's famine in the land of Judah. And so they moved to Moab. And now that's kind of not in God's will. And like, God does not sanction that. God was like, don't go interact with the Moabites, the Moab folks. But they do. They leave the land, the promised land. They go to Moab, and they have 2 sons. Their 2 sons get married to Moabite women. Another on the don't do list. Okay. So that's on the don't do list. And so they're living outside of God's will. In a lot of ways, they're living outside God's will. Elimelech dies. Her 2 sons, Naomi's 2 sons, die, and she's left with the 2 daughter-in-laws who are Moabite women. Now, one of the women, Ruth,
can we just explain real quick? Moabites. The reason this matters is that God's people weren't supposed to marry outside of the Israelites not because of ethnicity, but because of religious purposes and
religious practices.
So Moabites would have been worshipers of probably Baal and
for sure,
other false gods
of
the time. So and they would practice it, which the practice of that kind of worship was pretty barbaric. It was pretty I mean, it is pretty rough. So
there's your reason.
So God said, man, you don't need to bring those people with those practices into your family. And so that's kind of why the nation of Israel was set apart in the Old Testament to begin with, which really is a picture of saying, hey, that's how I want you to set yourself apart, that you'd worship me and worship me alone as you follow me as a follower of Jesus. Once again, not a racial based thing, but a who is your God based thing. Who are you serving?
For sure. And actually, Chris, you hit on it. I mean, Paul even goes as far as to say, don't be unequally yoked.
Yep.
Right.
Which that's why you have to do is the same number of curls on both sides. Because if one arm gets bigger than the others, you're
unequally yoked. I know what you're talking about. Not the same, Chris. Not the same. So anyway, there they are living outside of God's will in the Moab land. And Naomi says, hey, I'm going back to Israel. Honestly, where she should have been to begin with, but she's going to go back into God's will. And so she starts the trek back to Judah, and Ruth, and I don't remember the other person's name. I'm blanking on her name.
Yeah, I'm almost there. Orpah.
Orpah. Yeah. So Ruth's like, or Naomi's like, hey, you guys go back to your people because I got nothing for you. Like, you're coming with me is you're accepting that you're going to be destitute. You're going to be accepting the fact that you're going to live in poverty and perhaps even complete, destitution for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
And so
because
Orpah,
that was the only way
Yep.
they had provision was through the family line. And so when
Yeah.
there was not a male in the family, no one was there to take care of them.
There's no family line. There's nothing. So Orpah, kissed her mom and mother-in-law goodbye. So I assume they had good family relations. And she went back to the Moabite people. Ruth's like, no, I'm going to come with you to your land to serve your God, which is like, I love that. She says, your people will be my people and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. I love it. It is a commitment, not just the family, but a commitment to her family and God. A God that maybe she's not probably fully even familiar with.
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, they moved back to a little funnier, faster here. They moved back to Judah. And in Judah, they are definitely living in destitution because Ruth is now, she has to go out and it's called gleaning, that she has to go back out and essentially pick up the scraps behind the folks that are harvesting in the field. And when she does, and I'm going to use the air quotes if you can't see, but if you're watching online, air quotes, as chance would have it.
Yeah.
She ends up gleaning in the field of a kinsman redeemer, somebody who is supposed to take care of her if her husband or her in that line and that people group, if that people die. Yeah, if that person dies. She just happens, of all the people she goes and gleans in, she gleans in the field of somebody who should be taking care of her.
Mm-hmm.
Mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on, and I'm going to skip some parts. We may come back to it. They end up getting married because he does end up taking care of her. He ends up redeeming her. And in redeeming her, Chris, I'm going to skip to the end. She ends up being the great grandmother of David. All right. She's the great grandmother of David, a Moabite woman.
King David.
The great grandmother of King David. Now, Chris, I got a question. I told you I had the big overview. Now the question.
Yeah.
Why is Ruth in the Bible?
Well, because if it wasn't in the Bible would be really mean because it'd be ruthless. You didn't know I was going to do that.
I didn't see that coming.
Oh my goodness.
Chris, did you make that up or did you Google that? Where'd that come from?
No,
that was ridiculous.
Came from my head.
I'm using it though. I'm using it. It's now mine. And
Okay.
all our friends can use it too. But for real though, I got to
all right, on a serious note,
goodness.
I think there's a lot to it. One, it's showing that God acts that even in the waiting, God's working. It shows that God's redemption plan goes beyond even just his chosen people or the nation of Israel, that he shows grace to the outsider as well as the insider. I love that it shows that God can turn bitterness into restoration. If you go back to the end of Ruth 1,
you go there.
Naomi, whose name actually meant pleasant or sweet, she said, "No longer call me Naomi, call me Mara." Which, Robert, this is one of those things that, this is why reading it in the story form, it's hard to imagine, but she was living. She loses her husband. First, they moved to this place out of God's design. They're living. I mean, really, Robert, this is what happens a lot of times, is that when people begin to neglect their faith, they begin to walk away a little bit at a time, and they find themselves in a place that they never were meant to be. And then stuff starts happening, and it goes from bad to worse, and they begin to look up and go, "Man, I don't know what else to do, but I guess I'm going to go home." And I guess we'll go back there and we'll just figure it out there. But they don't go home with a heart full of hope. A lot of times they go home with a heart full of guilt and shame and
baggage, lots of
baggage and whatnot. And she actually says, "Man, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, call me bitter." That's what Mara meant. It was bitter or bitterness. And what's amazing is if you track it, you follow it to the end, she ends up holding her grandbaby or at the end, and God took, over time, God took what was bitter and he turned it to a blessing. And it's just one of those moments where it's understanding that God can take your bitter times, God can take your heavy moments, and He can take it and turn it to blessing, and that, you know, God restores what's lost. That sorrow is not the final word. Emptiness can become fullness. But I just love the fact that in the family line of Jesus is now a Moabite woman.
Right. No.
Right. That even in the family line, now it was purely through Abraham, right? It's still through the Abrahamic line. That's Boaz was an Israelite, but God brings this woman, this outsider to the inside of his family, which is great hope. And it just shows
it's
that
not the first time either, right?
No,
This is like a second time.
Even in the Old Testament, God showed that He had a plan for those who weren't Israelites. That His gospel, His grace wasn't just for the Israelite; it was for all. It's great news for us, and it's great hope for us. So there's probably others, man. There's so many theological pieces. One, the kinsman redeemer, right? Lynn ends up in the field of Boaz. So she's in a hopeless place. She found love in a hopeless place, Robert. But she ends up in this field, but God takes her there without her knowing, puts her in the right place. Like, it's not by chance. It's not by luck. It's by God's design that sometimes He allows us to or He leads us to a place where He can move in our lives, and He led them to this place, right? And God moved. But the kinsman redeemer, the reality is that He came in and rescued them. He didn't have to, but He chose to rescue them and to care for them, and that's what God has done for us. He came into our hopeless situation. He chose to rescue us and to redeem us. That redemption comes through this Redeemer. So there's so much, Robert. Is there stuff that you like? It's funny because I've seen this before. And Robert, here's the other deal. If you're going to write a story about how the Messiah would come and the line of which God would use to bring about the Messiah, if you were going to make up that story, this is not the story you would make up. That to me, I mean, if you just take a step back and academically think, they didn't make this up, or they wouldn't have told this part of the story.
No, wouldn't have been in it.
And it's just showing that you know, God used these ordinary people to a place till He moved and came and intersected all of all of history when He, you know, brought Jesus. But at the same time, like, I guess I just love that God uses our broken stories to tell a greater story.
Yeah, I think one of the things you say a lot of times is, and we talk about, is the idea that the Old Testament is a foreshadow of the New Testament. It's a foreshadowing of Jesus. And you see a lot of Jesus in this moment, that poverty to provision and providence, right? That kind of like moving in, that He, you know, always, you said, working in the waitness, bitterness to blessing, emptiness to fullness. Redemption goes beyond His people. But one of the things I do want to talk about, because it came up a couple times this weekend, is, and it's one of the things that I actually wrote down, is this idea of the working and the waiting piece. I think a lot of times we get stuck, or we see someone else's life in the thumbnail. I was having a conversation today after church, Chris. And I was talking to somebody in their 20s, and they're starting out and they're doing a lot of really good stuff. They're fired up for the Lord. They're a little frustrated with where they're at because God has them in this kind of period of maybe waiting, or maybe this period of refinement. Seems like He's developing their character. And I'm talking to them, and it hit me, because it hit me when I was reading Ruth. Mm-hmm. Ruth actually, like, it translated, it hit me. I'm giving him good counsel and the rest, but I'm doing it as somebody who's like 24 years in the making. And I was like, hang on. I was like, I got to tell you something. I was like, you know, I was reading Ruth this weekend, and one of the things that I noticed about Ruth is we read Ruth in 4 chapters, but we internalize, we think of Ruth in 4 chapters. Mm-hmm. We don't think of Ruth as something that happened over a period of time, a span of time. So when you hear about my my career and you hear about what God's done in my career, you're hearing the highlight reel of 24 years, but you're missing the 1 to 2 years where I would have got out of the military if you'd given me the opportunity, because there was nothing going on. I didn't enjoy what I was doing. Where God had me, I was not happy.
Right.
You're missing the part where I didn't enjoy doing, the 1 hour drive one way every day, the 1 hour drive back. Right.
Yeah.
You're missing out on the really difficult people that I really didn't like to work with, that God was using to refine the way I interact with people. So as I'm giving him counsel on how to deal with these people, I'm going back to that moment in time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I told him, I said, hey, you're going to have to be patient. Like you
what, Robert? What'd you tell him?
Like, yeah, you're going to have to be patient. I was like, you're in the 2 weeks of the 6 months, because he's in kind of a 6-month rotation. I was like, you're in the 2 weeks of a 6 month. I was like, you're going to have to just kind of rest in this. I was like, don't view your situation through my lens. My lens is 24 years long. 24 years from now, you might be having the same conversation, but you're going to have to go through 24 years. I was like, in Ruth, right? I wrote, this is what it really hit me is, and I told him, I said, look, Ruth was getting punched down. Like they continue to get punched down because, and I wrote, they're alone and they have no provision. And then I wrote and underlined, but God.
Yeah.
God then orchestrates over the harvest season I actually called it a meet cute, it's the old TV show, Anyway, orchestrates a meet cute between Ruth and Boaz that ultimately results in Obed, which happens to be David's great-grandfather. In other words, a son through Ruth and Boaz, David's great-grandfather. And I said, I believe there are times where we and I start feeling beat down, and then there's a kind of but God underlined, but God, because God in those times is orchestrating both current provision and future promise for those that hang in there and serve him faithfully. And I think a lot of times, Chris, we get to the point where we're not hanging in there. Maybe we look at someone else and we're like, but God's working in their life right now. And I can see it right here, but we miss the getting punched down part. Yeah. We miss the going out and gleaning. Gleaning, I mean, was hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work.
Well, yeah. And so I've got a couple thoughts here. First of all, so what does this mean for somebody? And then I'm gonna get back to the hard work part just a second. Is that so you're going through a tough time. What can we learn from Ruth? One is, man, if you find yourself outside of where God wants you to be, and you're just feeling like, man, life is tough. What do I do? Know this: you can always move back to where God wants you to be. Absolutely. You can always move in he is ready. He is willing. He says, man, make a move.
He's not. No, he's actually encouraging you to come back. He's not looking to get you back to punch you up.
But then also recognize and realize that, man, transformation and change takes time. That God's redemption sometimes
we want it overnight.
The story takes time, because they went back and they still had to get to work, man. Yeah. They still had to show up. Yeah. And what's amazing here, I love this. So they didn't hand out a bunch of stuff back then, but what they would do in Judah, it was just part of their way of taking care of the poor, is they would allow the poor to come behind the harvesters and pick up, pieces here and there, to pick up the scraps, to pick up the pieces. And that was a way of them being generous back then. But guess what? The poor still had to show up and pick up. And that's what that's what Ruth was doing. She was showing up.
Yeah, that's one of the things that showed up in the scripture. If you go from chapter 2 to chapter 3, in chapter 2, she's gleaning and she's getting a little bit, and Boaz is being very good to her, letting her actually just harvest next to the folks that are there. But then in chapter 3, this is where it hit me like, wait a second, this isn't tomorrow. In the scripture, it feels like tomorrow.
Yeah,
it does. It feels like tomorrow.
She had to keep showing up, dude.
Chapter 3, verse 1 says, one day, Ruth's mother-in-law said to Naomi, so one day.
Yeah, one day.
Meaning
not the next
tomorrow.
Day. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not your point. Yes, she had to work.
Yeah.
And she had a harvest.
Here's why I say that, because I think a lot of people are going, I want God to restore me. I want God to redeem me. There's some times we've got to go do the work.
Yeah.
You did not get, there's a stronghold in your life, or there's something going on in your life, and you need to be willing to show up and do the work.
Yeah.
Here's what's so crazy is if you'll continue to show up and do the work. What did Boaz do? He started telling his people, hey, leave more. Leave more for them. Not because Naomi earned it, not because he owed anything to I'm sorry, Naomi. Not that because he owed anything to Ruth. Yep. He did it out of his own kindness. Guess what? You don't earn God's favor, but he continues to pour it out if you continue to show up just out of his favor. Not because he has to, but because he goes, hey, I'm going to meet you where you at. I love you. I want you to know that I love you. You have to keep showing up, and it's hard work.
Yeah.
But just know that it's part of the redemption plan that God goes, and so that's, I don't know.
No, it's true.
When you look at it, you just, there's a lot of people who it's like, man, I went to counseling and it just didn't work. Well, what do you mean you went to counseling? Once, twice? It took you 17 years to, it took you 17 years to get in the place where you're at. You're not going to get out of it in 17 minutes. Like God can restore overnight. But the story we see in Grace, in Ruth, is that God's grace was grace upon grace day after day, but it wasn't overnight. It was over time.
And when I was chatting with a fellow today, it was funny because he's like, I really can't stand what I'm doing right now. It's like, but God has you there. Like God literally moved you there to be you, to bring you closer to your church, to bring you closer to the fun things you can do, to bring you closer to the people. Yeah. And you don't like where you're at, but maybe the Lord is using this time to generate discipline in you.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Discipline in you that will be useful later. Yeah. And he goes, but I really like this other stuff. I go, I guarantee you the other stuff you're talking about, you are going to find something about it that you genuinely can't stand. I was like, but here's the thing, but God might be developing in you right now the discipline that you need to do the thing he wants you to do in the future well.
Yeah.
Right. And Chris, there's some things I just can't stand doing. I'll tell you right now, you know what I can't stand doing? You know, one of the things that it really just hurts my soul, but I've developed a discipline to do it.
What's that?
It's getting through all my email.
Yeah.
I really can't stand going through email. There's nothing fun about it. There's nothing soul giving about it. I have to literally buckle my butt to the seat and go through the email, partly because it's professional, partly because it's courteous and it's the adult thing to do. That's what I tell people. Thank you for being an adult and responding to an email. Yeah. And if you're not responding to an email and you're like, did he just call me not an adult? I didn't say that. But adults respond to kind of communication. So anyway, I don't, but I know that there were a few times back in my earlier career where it was through test pilot school and it was through some of the flight test stuff where some of the tedious disciplines that require you to just sit down and grind it out. Like that discipline transferred over to the current discipline I'm using to do what's required for the current role I'm in. Right. And so a lot of times in this case, God is using our showing up and our grinding and getting things done. He's working in that moment because he's preparing you for something else. It says in the Bible that God used, and I was reading in Psalms, it was in Psalms that God used Joseph's time as when he got sold into slavery to prepare his character to be number 2 in Egypt. And so sometimes God's preparing our character. In this case, with Ruth and Naomi, he is orchestrating something bigger than they could possibly imagine. And frankly, wouldn't even be able to know in their lifetime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of crazy. The only other thing, Chris, I wanted to hit real quick. You said, aside from working in his waiting, you talked about redemption goes beyond his people. And I want to just take a second and touch on that before we wrap up, because I think that's another key piece of this is God continues to pull people that I would offer. Sometimes we're like, that's not in the crowd.
Yeah.
Gotta be somebody different. Continuing to pull those people in. I think of, and honestly, I mean, if the stories are true, Justin Bieber, not to get too kind of out there, but Justin Bieber, and I'm going to get a little out there, but Justin Bieber's holding worship concerts at his public events.
Yeah.
Like Jesus concerts. And yeah, he might be a young Christian. He may be a young Christ follower, and he may be learning. We're really quick, by the way, to judge young Christ followers. We're really quick to condemn them because, you know, they should be saved and then complete and total and utter saints.
Right.
Yeah. But him and Jelly Roll and these folks, Chris, mind blowing. I would never even a million years, what is it? Was it the lead singer of Kiss? One of the Kiss band members got pulled into the family of God. I think Gene Simmons, I have to look it up, but God calls beyond his people. He calls people into the family of God. And it's the people that sometimes we just don't even recognize. Yeah. It's that redemption beyond our imagination, our conception.
When ultimately it's us because we're Gentiles.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, like we're
which is all the reason why we should be cool. We should be excited about it.
Yeah, no joke. We for some reason have forgotten that we were on the other side of those people, right? At some point in time. Dude, can I give you a few takeaways just from what we can learn from Boaz in this though? I think a lot of times we read Ruth and she's the main character, but here's what I love. Like Boaz shows his godliness shows an everyday character. The first time we read about him, he's working, he's leading, he's blessing others. He greets workers with blessing and they respond with respect. Like really, he is a picture of a godly boss is what he is.
Yes, he is.
If you think about it,
did you get his greeting when he came out to his people?
Go ahead.
His first time in the field is pretty funny. He as he's showing up and he's coming out there and everybody's working. I love this. It's verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4. Boaz arrives and greets the harvesters. The Lord be with you. And I love it. They all answer, the Lord bless you.
Yeah.
Like that's how he starts his conversation. I love it, man.
Yeah. So you know, his faith or his walk is seen in daily conduct, not just what he does on the weekend. Mm-hmm. Then power should protect, not exploit. He had wealth, status, authority, and really in their culture, Ruth was vulnerable. She had no one to protect and take care. Yet he used his position to protect her, not take advantage of her.
That's right. Yep.
Then there's generosity, goes beyond minimum obligation. Right. He did more than what the law required. He invited Ruth to eat. He told the work. He fed her. Right. He fed her with his own people. He told the workers to leave extra. He ensured her safety. And then in the end, he redeemed her family line, even at the cost of his own family line. Like that's what we don't get. Culturally speaking, it actually cost him to redeem her. And in fact, there was another relative, and this is interesting, right? There was another relative closer that Boaz said, if that person doesn't redeem you, I will, but they are in line first. And at first they're like, sure, because of the land that they would get with. Yeah. But then they realize, oh, I have to take her on and have a child with her. Well, I don't want to do that because that would cost me. Right. And so Boaz was like, no, I'm going to do it. So at his own cost. How did God redeem us? At his own cost. So, I mean, incredible there. Integrity matters in private and public. There's a scene in there where he wants to protect Ruth's reputation and handles things right. He followed process rather than impulse. He didn't just jump at it, right? He saw worth that others would miss.
Can we talk about the one thing though? There's one part that I do love, right? You're talking about the process, go ahead. He's so wise in this moment. He goes to the gate, and that's the way, that's the meeting place. He gathers 10 elders. He calls the guy who should redeem Ruth, and he doesn't start with, hey, are you going to redeem Ruth? Mm-hmm. I love it. He starts with, hang on. He says, he goes, I'm going to read it. It's chapter 4, verse 2. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, hey, sit here. And so they did. Then he goes to the guardian redeemer, the guy who should have it. He is this Naomi, who's come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relatives, Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you'll not, tell me so I can redeem it because I'm next in line.
Yeah.
And I love the guy's like, oh, I'll redeem it. I love this. Boaz goes, oh, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name and maintain the name of the dead with its property. I love it because he didn't start with that part. He started with, hey, do you want to get the land? And then it's that Columbo. Oh, and by the way, hey, one more question. Hey, oh, by the way. And it kind of like takes him off balance. And the guy's like, whoa, no, I don't want that. I think that was incredibly wise.
Yeah.
I think it was incredibly wise because I think Boaz he cut to the heart of the matter, which it was for that guy. It was about the personal gain. I think if he had started with the Ruth part, the guy may say, well, I mean, do I get the land with it?
Yeah.
Right. Not I get the land. I'm going after in other words, heart of the matter. It was all about the land. Yeah. Whereas Boaz like, no. This is about the person.
Yeah.
This is about Ruth.
Yeah.
So it was very protective of her doing the right thing. It's just really amazing how he provides. And it's such a picture of what God does for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly, it's a reminder of what does it look like to be a godly man? Right. Are you going to treat people with dignity? Will you use your influence to help other people? Do you give generously? Or do you live with integrity? Are you willing to follow God's ways patiently? Right.
Right.
Do you notice overlooked people? And do you act redemptively? Like, do you want the redemption of other people, that what's best, not because they deserve it, but because God loves them? Man, dude. I mean, there's so much there that it's funny. I'd never thought of it that way, but as I was looking at it this last time, I was like, I never thought about it from the Boaz side.
Well, I had never seen it from the Boaz side. That's really cool. I saw it this time, like I said, from this, like you said, it was waiting when God's working, from that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we see the highlight reel of someone else's life. We get to the end where God has redeemed whatever their past was. And that we're like, oh man, like, and we get stuck in. Actually, it was funny, Chris, in our sermon today, and then I'll let you wrap. In our sermon today, we talked a little bit about how Paul, at the time Saul on the road to Emmaus, he had this moment with God where God's like, hey, why are you attacking me and killing my people? Anyway, he blinds him. He goes into prayer and fasting for 3 days. And I didn't know this, but my pastor pointed this out today, that 3-day pattern is seen 25 times in the Bible. It's 25 times in the Bible where there's this 3-day pattern, the 72 hours pattern, where you have a death, a delay, and a deliverance. And so for Paul, at the time Saul, his death, he's now blind. Now he's in waiting, he's fasting and praying, and that led to his deliverance. In this case, you had maybe not 72 hours, but you had a day one death, husbands and sons. You had this delay. They're out in the field working. You have Boaz providing and being that kinsman redeemer. You have Ruth hanging in there with Naomi. No reason she should, but did it anyway, because she just has this righteous nature in her at this moment. And then you have this deliverance where you have Obed, ultimately the son between Boaz and Ruth, who is ultimately the great grandfather of David in the line of Jesus. And so I think it's interesting. Sometimes we want to get to the deliverance part really fast. We don't want to sit in the delay that much. We would like to get through that really quickly. And you don't see that here. I think you read it in 4 chapters and you're like, oh, that happened really fast. It didn't really happen that fast. And
it might have been years, bro. So we don't really know the timeline. Don't really know. Yeah. So if you're if you're listening and you feel like you're in the delay, I would say, what is the Lord teaching you? How can you learn in this phase? What is it that he's doing? As Chris pointed out earlier, if you're living in the land of Moab, maybe it's time to come back home. Maybe he's just teaching you because he's got something for you. Maybe like Joseph, he's refining your character. But this is what I can tell you for sure. But God, he will be your deliverer. He is the deliverer.
And that should be exciting. That should kind of say, okay, Lord, what are you doing here? I don't particularly love this part in my life, but what are you doing here? What can I learn? Yeah. And that's a question I ask myself all the time. Chris, bring us home.
Man, I think you've hit it really well. I love the death, delay, and deliverance thing. I think that's amazing, dude. Just I'm gonna have to even chew on that some more. I think for me, just as you put it, as far as the timing of it, that man, even when you walk through the wrecks of life, just know that God is still writing a redemption story. And you just have to be willing to let him write that story.
Amen.